Okay. So I just wanted to give you guys a nano update without it being necessarily about writing. So National Novel Writing Month has been going great, and daily writing routines have been developed. I'm finding time to read a lot more, finding time to write a lot more. But I didn't really necessarily want to talk about the writing aspect of it. I wanted to talk more about the daily routine of it. The best way to kickstart your day, if you want to write good and if you want to get into the mindset of writing, is probably by listening to a podcast. And the podcast that I have for you guys this week is called How Writers Write. It's basically a podcast that Brian Murphy hosts where he talks to other writers about their routine, about how they write, their daily practices, their rituals. And it's such a wholesome podcast to listen to when you're feeling down, when you're feeling demotivated, when you don't find the inspiration, because it really instills the fabric of what writing is into your brain. You listen to that podcast and you feel invigorated, like you're ready to write because of the questions he asks and the place that he himself is as a writer. How Writers Write podcast has brilliant interviews with other well-established writers to help you get over your doldrums of writing. The How Writers Write podcast is so good and so effective in not letting you feel like you are worthless. I think that's so important when you're in this line of work, because sometimes writers spend hours, weeks, months, years of their lives trying to write something that they don't even have an audience for most of the time. And it's so demotivating and crushing to your spirit when you're writing and you read back and you read your stuff and you feel like it's horrible, and or you've gone 6 to 8 months writing a project, and when you're done with it, it doesn't make any sense. All of these sort of anecdotal evidences and anecdotal devices are used in the podcast very effectively. His guests are down to earth, well established New York Times bestselling authors that tell you how it really is. And hearing that every morning or whenever I can, especially during NaNoWriMo, it's so refreshing, because there have been times when I'm writing where I feel like this doesn't really mean anything, or it doesn't have the weight that I want it to have. But then I listen to that podcast and listen to other writers telling me that that's exactly how they feel. It's nice hearing them talk about these things, because then you don't feel so alone. Brian himself is a great, relatable host. All of his problems seem like our problems. All of his queries are sort of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm listening to the interview. He really knows the struggles of up-and-comers, and that's what I love about his style of hosting, because he has the bright-eyed wonder, I should say, of a first-time author, but he also knows how to navigate the interviews where it doesn't feel like it's stale or it's boring. It always feels fresh, even though the questions are somewhat the same, but the answers that he gets from writers are always unique, and they always are motivational. They help. And speaking of motivation, he has this weekly episode series where he talks, it's called Monday Motivation, and it talks about how not to get stuck up in your own ways, how to get out of your own way and find the time to write. It's really, really like small 5 to 8 minute snippets of things you just need to hear on a Monday morning when you feel like the manuscript hasn't moved, the story is dead, the characters are nowhere, things like that, where you feel like you're stuck in quicksand and it's going down fast. Brian will be there to help you. My favorite interview is probably with James Wade. I think it's episode number 36, and it's one of my favorite interviews. If you guys want a gateway into that podcast, I think that episode is a great start. He asks just the right questions. James's answers hit the spot. I mean, it's just an amalgamation of everything I wanted to hear and everything I need to hear. Like, there have been times where I go back to that podcast and re-listen to it when I'm feeling low, when I'm feeling down, and it just helps me. It picks me up. There's some very sincere and truthful dialogues about the process of writing, the struggles of writing, the struggles of reading, the industry, how you're treated, and what it's like writing during a pandemic. I mean, all of these things are, truths that we hold very close to our hearts, and it's nice to hear about it in a very impartial way. Yeah, that one's one of my favorites. So that's all from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you check out the How Writers Write podcast. It's very good. Even if you're not a writer, even if you're not creatively inclined, if you check out that podcast, you will come out a slightly better version of yourself, a motivated version of yourself, an inspired version of yourself. I highly recommend that podcast. Speaking of podcasts, me and my brother host a podcast every week called the Broadcast Podcast, and you can find links to that and much more down below. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you guys very soon. Happy writing. Nazar out.